Okay, welcome to this session of the U&I University. Today we're going to look at some new techniques that expand a little bit on what Peter has been teaching in the last few sessions. We're going to look at using the 2-4 texture family. These are very nice patterns that give you an RGB output plus an alpha channel. So I'm going to discuss how to use these in your own work, and there are some pitfalls, so we're going to check the pitfalls out. And then we're going to use the alpha channel we're going to corrupt the alpha channel and use it for our own nefarious purposes to make some art that I think is pretty cool. Next, we're going to look at what are known as the 3-1 density field or DF textures, and we're going to use some of those textures to interact with another DF object and etch it away so that we can create a completely new structure. Then we're going to go back in spirit to what Peter was talking about when he first demonstrated his faces program, if you've seen that session. And we're going to generate a very complex picture using only one simple object. And we're going to repeat that motif and create a very complex structure. And finally, we're going to look at using some cool space distortions to create an object using a sweeping pattern, which is a very common way to make some very nice DF objects. And then we're going to apply some mirrors to that to create a completely different kind of object. So that's what's on the agenda for today. So let's get started. Just a note, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I'm going to try to explain what I'm doing, in particular the keystrokes I'm taking to make things happen. But I don't expect that you're going to necessarily want to follow along. If you can, that's great. But if not, the idea is, of course, you can go back and look at the video and work through at your own pace. So I encourage you today to just kind of understand the potential and see what we're talking about, and then go back and do your own research as you increase your mastery of the software. Okay, so right now on the screen I have just a default kind of startup. And what we're going to do here is go over to the right-hand screen to the inspector here on ArtMatic, and we're just going to select a new tree. This is the density field basic tree. And we don't really want any of this stuff, so we're just going to delete it. Now we have this 3-1 DF lines or dot plane and line tile, but what we really want is to use a different shape. We want to use a density field shape, one of the ones that comes out of the box. So if you just click on it, you will bring up this menu. We'll just pick box, how clever, and we'll give it a radius of about 4. And this is going to be the drawing that we're going to start working with. Now down here in the shaders section of ArtMatic, you see there are 3 colors. These, as Peter explained, are background colors that you use in certain techniques. We'll leave them for that, like that right now, but here's the thing we have to change. We need to click on this shader panel and come down and look at what's called the Geographic Color Lookup table, or CLUT. We'll click on that, and now you can see that our DF object is looking like a DF object should look. And then, in other words, you're seeing a representation of its entire space, its negative space, its surface, and its positive space. Don't worry if you don't understand that right now, but this is a very useful thing to use when you're modeling. It helps you align your diagrams to bring them together. And you pretty much always want to be in this mode when you are creating things in 3D objects in Voyager. I'm just going to go down here to the clear panel and get rid of the 2 keyframes at the bottom because I don't want them right now. And I see that a cone has come up here as the item I've selected, but I really would like to start with, a box. So let's just make that a box. Now let's just save this file, and we'll call it something clever like box primitive. And we'll save it in Designer. Okay, let's replace it. Now, let's bring this file into Voyager so we can start to get our work done. So in Voyager, you're going to come up to the menu and click, oh no, I'm sorry, we're going to do this. We're going to go here to the Object Inspector and click on this. It brings up a menu, and down here you have a list of DF objects that you could potentially open. We're going to open one. You could have as many as 16, but we're only going to open one. And what we want is, no, we want Designer, and we want our box primitive, and there it is. Now when I click on this, here is the cube that we've designed. And I believe Peter explained that over here is on the Designer side is a hot link. If you click on this, it turns color, and you get a nice little picture of what is going on in Voyager. And that's very helpful because you can make changes over here in Designer, and they will be reflected immediately over here. For example, I could change the box to a sphere, and there it goes. But let's go back to a box. And let's make the radius a little bit larger. Let's say 4. Oops, not 44, but 4. And that just makes the size a little bigger. Today we're going to look at textures and how you merge textures in with your design. So the first thing we want to do is go back to the parent over here in Designer. Click on it to make it highlighted. And then tap the B key on your computer. And this brings you then to a branch. We've added a branch to the parent. Now we want to hold down the Control key and click on this, and it brings up a menu of potential configurations. Today we're exploring textures that have 2 inputs and 4 outputs. So we can click there. And now if we click on the object, here are all of the available 2 input, 4 output objects that you have to work with in ArtMatic Designer. The one we want to use at first is a semi-regular tile. It is a texture. We're going to, down here, then you have all different types of potential that you can use. We're going to take Islamic 6-fold B, just because I like it. And we're going to set its characteristics. We'll keep the color cycle at 0.5. We'll keep its variance at 1. But we're going to change the frequency a little bit to, well, how about 0.5? Now, we've created this, but it's not hooked up anyway to our object. And this is how you begin to apply texture to an object. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and move this to the left-hand side. Now, I'm going to go up here and add a 4:4 alpha scale and output tile. The texture, the pattern that you have is in RGB, and those first 3 outputs are for that. The 4th one is the alpha channel, and you mix your DF object with the alpha channel by simply adding it to number 4. So I'll push down Option Command to bring up the connecting menu. The father is going to be outlet 1 of the DF object. You see a little picture of it there. The connection is going to be inlet 4 of this tile, and if you connect, you see the texture. It's mapped right on to your object. Let's just change the perspective a little bit. Now, I mentioned pitfalls, And here's one of them. This looks very nice, but what happens if you look at this object from another point of view? Well, let's just rotate it a little bit. And you can see that the pattern is not quite right. You see, it's not the same pattern in every direction. In fact, if you look at this view, it seems like the pattern is just slicing through the cube, sort of like that taffy that you get at Christmas time. It has little Christmas trees in it, and you know it goes through the dimension, but it's not really patterned around all four of the or all six of the faces. So we're going to have to fix that, because when you use these textures, you're going to definitely want to have them represented properly on all the faces of the texture that you use. So we're going to apply a tile, which is basically a spherical distortion, or a way that you can change your space. We're going to add it above the texture tile here. So I'll click on above. And once again, we're going to have to change this to a different configuration. So I hold down Control and click and bring up the menu. What I want here is a 3 in and 2 out tile. And I'm going to push Command and click on the parent to hook it up. So now the 3 outputs are hooked up. And we're going to want to change the tile to what's called a spherical projection. Now, I hear you saying, if it's a cube, why are you using a spherical projection? I don't know. It's just the way it works. But if you go down here to the algorithms, you'll find that there's something called triple face projection. If you click on that, now your pattern is on all the faces correctly aligned, correctly displayed, however you look at it. And that is a very good technique that you can use to get your texture correct in the way you want to look at it. Let's suppose that instead of a cube here, we'll go back to the DF object and make it a sphere. Well, now, if you look at the sphere, let's make the sphere a little bigger. Let's make it 8. No, let's not make it 0.58. Let's make it 8. Okay, now you can see that the pattern is really not very nicely displayed on here at all. So again, you can change this from triple face projection to spherical projection, and that begins to cast your texture onto the object. If you want to think about this in a practical way, think of the texture as on a flat sheet of paper, and what you're doing is you're pressing that paper onto the object. And there will be distortions unless you correct for them. Now you're going to find that the pattern here is a little bit large, and so you're just going to want to come over to your object, to the texture, and just increase the frequency, and you'll see that the pattern closes down very nicely. And if you rotate it, it's perfect in whatever orientation you choose. So using the 3-2 spherical projection with your objects is a very good technique. It makes your objects look more real. And as you're developing your own things, you'll want to experiment with different shapes, and you'll have to experiment with different ways of projecting it in order to make it work. But I hope that that gives you a little bit of sense of how you put textures onto an object. These textures are very nice, and there are a lot of them. You can change them to lots of things. And you can even come over, these are the tilings. You can even come over to some of these things that you think might be a little crazy, like a vein network. And you'll see it's not very light, but you can see that you've put a perfectly projected series of veins on this sphere. Before we move on to actually creating the design, I want to show you one more thing, and that is this alpha scale and offset tile. If you click the scaling on it, you can increase the lightness of your alpha channel, and therefore you can make your object become lighter or much darker. You can see it's still there, but it's very dark. So you're always going to want to adjust your light intensity after you decide what kind of pattern that you're going to want to use. And as we go on through today's lessons, I'm going to add this type of color section on almost everything that we do. So we have independent control over our objects. This looks pretty nice. It's a sphere with leaves on it. Okay, well, let's go back and do something a little bit different now. Let's go back to the semi-regular tiles and back to Islamic 6-fold B, and let's adjust the frequency again so we have something nice. Okay. Now, we haven't really used the alpha channel output from the texture tile, but now we're going to use it in a very different way, and this will give you a very interesting kind of result that I hope that you can use in your own artwork. So what we're going to do is get rid of that, and we're going to add below the DF tile a very useful tile, which is I'm holding control and clicking, 2 outputs in and 1 put out. These are normally things that do blending, and what we're going to do is pick one of the logic tools, because logic tools enable you to place 2 objects together using Boolean logic. So you can intersect them, you can subtract them, you can merge them, whatever you want to do. And what we're going to do in this particular case is we're going to take this object here, and we're going to take its alpha channel of our texture. We're going to add below it a filter, and we're going to make this filter by pushing control and clicking. I bring up the menu. We're going to make this filter a 1 input, 1 output. We need to connect it to the alpha channel. Right now it's connected to the red channel. So you hold down Option Command and click. Change the father to outlet 4, inlet 1, okay? And we're going to select a very interesting filter, which is called line shaders. And this gives you a number of different lines that you can use here in the algorithm. So we want to use a DF line, a density field line. So what we're actually going to do is take the alpha channel and turn it into a density field object. Now we just have to hook it up to our logic down here. And to do that, we will click on this, and this algorithm we want to use is intersection. And we want to connect, holding down Option Command, we want to connect outlet 1 to inlet 1. And here we want to connect, holding again these keys, we want to connect outlet 1 to inlet 2. And when we connect them, we should be able to see what we're trying to do here, intersect. Okay. So now we've taken the DF shape and we've intersected it with a line. This doesn't look very good at the moment, but if you increase the thickness of the DF line to about 8 or 9, you can see that what we've done is we've taken the lines of the texture that made the difference between the pattern and shape, and we've actually made those into an object, and we've connected it to the sphere. I think this looks kind of ugly because the sphere is a solid, and you really want it to look a little, you want to pop a little bit more with the thin surface. So the next thing that you can do is you can go over to your object here, the DF object, and on the output stream, we can also add a 1-1 filter. There are 2 ways that you can take an object that has some depth and basically thin it out so that you're only looking at the surface. The easiest way is to choose the absolute value of X filter, ABSX, and click on it. If you look at your screen, now you have a disaster because absolute value, if you remember your high school math, is only about taking the positive side of a number. But there's a little algorithm down here, option, you can pick negative. And when you pick the negative, it hollows your sphere out very nicely, and you just have basically a thin surface with your texture cut out of it. The other way that you can do this is that you can, instead of the absolute value, you can pick the mirror. And mirror will take an object and basically mirror it. But if you use the values of the offset between 0 and 1, you can actually thin it out. So let's check 0.2. And now we have a nice hollow sphere. The texture we put on it has a little bit of a depth to it, so it looks quite nice. And that's how you do it. So that is one way that you can basically apply a alpha output to a DF object and create new shapes. What could you do with this? Well, you could use it on a flat plane to create fences or grid work, all kinds of things. You can just use it to make pretty looking spheres like we've done here. But if you're like me, you're thinking, well, what about that's the pattern, but what about the figure? What about the background? What can I do with that? And it turns out that you can also do the same technique with the inside as well as the outside. I'll show you this. Let's just go back to the parent and add a space holding tile below it. And then let's click on this and the shift key at the bottom of the tree here, and then the N key, and that will turn this into a compiled tree. Peter has shown you these in some of the other his lectures. We're going to do this because it enables us to easily duplicate the structure that we've just created. And so let's take this tree and using the B key, add a branch. Let's just copy it with Command C and then, let's not do that. That was bad. Let's delete that. Let's add a branch and Command C to copy, and then click on it and Command V. And now we have an exact duplicate of this structure over here on this side. We're going to want to hook them up, and so once again, we're going to select a 2-1 logic tool. Okay, now what we have to do at this point is go up here and change the insides of this tree. This is the tree, and what we want to do is we want to make this, instead of an intersection, we want to make it a subtraction. So when you're using the logic tools, the input on the right will be operated on the input on the left. In other words, this DF shape is going to be subtracted from the DF line shape. It turns out we want to reverse that so that the DF lines are subtracted from the sphere. So what we'll do is Option Command. We'll make this output go to inlet 2. And we'll make this outlet go to inlet 1 and connect it. Okay. Now if we go back here, we can, I'll tell you what, before we do that, let's just look at what we've just done. Let's bring this down here. Now, I think you probably have learned that in ArtMatic and in Voyager, the leftmost output is the only one that registers on your screen. But if you move this over by using the Control and Arrow key, Shift and Arrow key, and then you click on your view to update it, now you see what you just created. Here we've created the background. We've subtracted that DF grid from the sphere, and over here we have the sphere as it would look if we did it the other way around. So you have the two figures. Now the next thing to do that would be fun would be to put some color on them. and maybe combine them and see if we could get a cool looking object. So let's take the figure here and let's add some color to it. I like to simply add a 1,4 tile. This adds RGB color and it leaves an alpha channel, which just passes through, by the way. And we'll make that light blue. Then let's add the same thing over here. And we'll make that a 1,4 tile. And we will make that dark blue. Now, I mentioned before, it's nice to be able to have some control over your colors. So on both of these, let's just put a color section underneath it. That means that we can control the intensity. For example, right now, if we're looking at this light blue, we can make it much lighter now by simply changing the scaling here. And what would happen if we combine them? Unfortunately, in ArtMatic, there is not a, when you look at the available types of components you have, there is no 8 input output sort of tile. So we have to do something which is known as packing. And we'll just take these tiles, and I like to do it this way. You go to the insert menu, pack the outputs, and now it takes the RGB and the alpha and it converts it into a stream that only has one output. This is very handy for merging objects, which is what we're going to do right now. Now, instead of having 8 outputs to deal with, we only have 2, and we can merge them. But this time, because we're using RGB color, we need to use a logic tool that allows you to use RGB color. And that happens to be the control click, the 2,4 packed logic. It works exactly the same way as the other packed logics, except it deals with RGB color. We'll connect the two by connecting them here. Outlet 1, inlet 2, connect. And there you have a really, I think, cool sphere that is colored with the alpha channel of your texture way back when. And you've dealt with both the figure in the front and the background and brought them together. You can, at any time, start tinkering with the lightness and darkness of these things, whatever you like. You could actually, even if you want, put texture on the texture, but that's something I'll leave you to play with, because now I want to show you a different effect that you can do. And that is looking at some of the shading opportunities that you have here in Voyager. If you click on the object inspector once again, you can see up here that we're using volumetric shading, but there are also lots of other possibilities as well. A lot of them allow you to have 2 things at once. Down at the bottom here we have opaque and light. We have opaque and transparent. And we also have opaque and translucent. All of these require 2 inputs to work with. And right now, as you can see, we only have 1 input. But if you want to work with these, which you're going to do, you have to create a second input. So we'll delete this for now. You can save this if you want to come back to it, but it's in the file. So let's just delete our work a little bit. Let's go back to, let's go all the way back to this point. And remember, this was the figure, and this was the background. Let's just delete this background. And instead, let's go up and branch and add another DF object. And we'll make this one a sphere and a radius of, what did we have over here? What was our radius? It was 8. Yes, you see here, radius 8. So we'll make this one also, let's make it just a little bit less than 8. Let's make it 7.8. So it's just going to be a little smaller than the sphere that we have right there. And let's, of course, make it a sphere, not a box. So sphere, and radius is 7.8. Okay. Now, if you, at this point, bring this down to the bottom of your tree, you have an extra output. You have the main output, which is what you can see on the screen, and you have what we know, what we call an X out, or extra output. And X outs are what you can use to make the opaque and transparent shading work. So first of all, let's do this. Let's add some color again. Let's make this time, let's add the one for color and make it kind of a gray here. And let's add one for color to this, and let's make it kind of a yellow. Okay. Now, if you want to see what you've just done, you can, as I showed you before, just shift the position of these two and click the update. And you see here's a sphere inside our other sphere. It doesn't look like much yet. But if you do this, let's put a color section on them as well so we can control the color. If you go back to your, close this and then go back to it, you can now see down here, you have these two options available for you, opaque and light and opaque and transparent. That's because we've created an extra output and we've assigned that extra output, or we're going to opaque and transparent. This means that the output on the left will be rendered opaquely, the one on the right will be transparent. And if you click on it, you get a really cool looking transparent sphere bounded by your object. So that's a very nice technique you can use. You can use this in your figures to create windows in houses. You can make stained glass. You could equally well make a transparent texture and add that in, whatever your creativity, wherever your creativity takes you. But that shader is very, very nice, and I recommend that you explore it a little bit. The other thing that we can do is we can use the other shader, which is opaque and light. When you use this one, what happens is that the object here that you've created emits light. And you can see that it emits it in a volumetric way, so it's very intense in the center, and it's not quite filling its space as it gets to the edge. But you have some controls for that. First of all, you can create here, you can control the density. So if you make it a little more dense, you can fill it out. And then you can go to your color section and also play a little bit with the intensity of it. So you can bring that down or up, darker. Another nice thing to do is to maybe add a little more color control. So if you add another 4:4 tile underneath it and click on it, you can bring up something, say color shift. And this will let you tinker with the values of the color you just selected. So simply by sliding along here a little bit, we can give it a little bit of a reddish tilt, something like that. So that kind of looks like maybe a sun or something. And again, maybe we can increase the intensity of it a little bit here. So that gives you a light effect, but you really can't appreciate it here in the world as it's all lit up like this. So to make it look a little more dramatic, let's change things around. Let's use an ArtMatic surface instead of planet A, the built-in planet. And let's go down here to the edit menu, and let's bring up absolute colored terrain, flat plate, concrete plates. And that's going to create a ground effect. You can't see it because I've got the sun turned off, but if I turn the light on and the skylight, you can see that there's a plane down there. Let's make those dark again. And let's lower the, well, okay, now what we want to do is we want to use this light creatively. You can shade the light that you've created as a projector so that it will throw light rather than just radiating it. To do that, you click on this box here, Shade as Projector. And then you need to make sure that your quality is good or better. And then you need to click on Cast Shadows. And that should, in fact, work, but it isn't, of course. So, okay. This is why we hate doing things live. I'm going to, I'm just, rather than trying to debug it, I'm just going to cheat at this point and show you one that I already did. And this is in your files. Let's do this one. Okay, and there we have the example. Let's just bring this up here also in Voyager to complete my humiliation. You can see it's pretty much the same structure. I don't know why it didn't work just then. But here you have this object, and it is opaque and light, shaded as projector. We have quality is good. And now if you click on Cast Shadows, it actually creates a nice pattern for you. If you turn that around and you had the light as you had the light coming from the object, then your lines would be colored as well. But this is a very nice technique that you can use. I think what I did there is I didn't click on Cast Shadows before. I think that was my mistake. I think I clicked on this, so I apologize for that. So let's review. You can make an object, you can texture it. You need to make sure that you're applying a spherical projection to it so that you can wrap the paper, the flatness of that texture around the object that you've created. You can take, and you can use that. You can capture the alpha channel of your object, and you can use that to etch the solid, either by using the lines or by using the background, or by using both, as we saw. You can also illuminate it with a transparency that gives it a window-like look. You can also illuminate it with a light-giving factor using casting shadows. And that will enable you to create objects that glow in space and cast shadows or light onto a background. It's very nice if you're making street lights, or you made a little village scene and you want some lights or something like that. Okay, so let's change gears now and go to our second set of objects. These are going to be the 3 input, 1 output DF patterns. And so let's just clear all this stuff out. Let's go back and turn off Cast Shadows. Let's get some light in the sky. Let's go back and create Planet A. And, okay, so there we are. Make the sky a little nicer. And let's pick altitude gradient. Okay, that's not a very nice looking sun, so let's make it maybe yellow. Okay. Now, let's go here and add a, using the B key, let's add a tile, and it's a 3-1. If you look up here, you'll see that you have, in this little block here, as well as DF shapes, you have DF patterns. So if you click on this, you'll see that there is a menu of nice looking patterns that you can use. And these patterns don't look very good right now, but these are patterns that you can mix with your objects to create cool looking spaces. So let's just say we'll take maze tubes. And I've determined that this makes kind of a nice pattern. You can tinker with them on your own, but we'll change the phase a little bit, and we'll change the frequency to 2.44. Okay. Now, by itself, that doesn't mean anything. If you look at this, it's not converging into an object, it's just there, but it's meant to be incorporated with a DF object. So if we make a sphere, a cube, let's make the box, say 8. Okay, and if we take the box and we add it, use a Boolean operation to merge these two, we should see an interesting effect. In fact, we're going to go up here and use the 2-1 logic tools once again. This time we're going to use Chisel Intersect, which is an intersection, but it creates a edge around what you're doing. We'll connect the two by, and remember now we're going to take the box here, the cube, and we're going to chisel it with the object on its right. In this case, holding down these two, holding down Option Command. Outlet 1 connects to inlet 2, and I really hate that sky. I really hate that sky. Now you have a cube, but you can see that you've etched a cube with the maze tubes. So the cube has kind of a different type of shape. This pattern has etched the cube in this way. And if you change the parameters of the maze tubes object, you can change the way this looks. This is another case where you want to use a mirror because this is a bit thick. So we'll just throw a mirror in here. Again, it's a 1-1 object. And we'll give it a thickness of about 0.5. And now that neatly clears up the sphere. So this really is just kind of like a sphere that's hollow in the middle and has this surface cut out. You could color it at this point. You could add another sphere as we did in the last examples. But I think it would be fun to add another DF pattern to this and kind of cascade the effect. So let's go back up here to our parent and add another 3-1. We can just copy this one and paste it. Let's make this one, instead of maze tubes, let's make it random tubes in the XY plane. Random tubular XY. Let's change this to make it a little thinner or thicker. Let's I think that's good. Let's make this about 0.966. See, I'm cheating here. These are things I've already predetermined look nice, but you can explore on your own time. And now let's go back here and let's take this object and look at it for a second. If you recall, what we've done is we've created a cube and its stream, the DF stream comes down here and it's mirrored and then it's intersected. Let's just take a copy of that stream and we will just make it a little bit smaller. This is an offset, 1-1 offset. This is the same cube, it's the same size, it's just another copy of it. We'll make this, say, -1. Just make it a little smaller. And then let's use this smaller cube and intersect it with the pattern that we've made up here. And to do that, we simply, again, invoke a 2-1 logic tool. Once again, we're going to subtract the DF pattern from the logic tool, from the cube. And now we have 2 of these piled up next to each other. And you can, of course, you're already there. You can merge these 2 together as well. And to do that, we'll simply add yet another 2-1 logic tool. And this time we'll take union. We'll combine the 2. And okay, that looks pretty ugly too. Okay, I'm 0 for 0 today. This is great. Okay, this is telling me it's not converging well, and I'm just desolated by this. So I'll tell you what, let's go back and use the one from the file. Now we're doing okay, and we'll open that up. Okay, so what you have here is the way it should work. You have the original box, and you hollowed it out, and you intersected it here with a pattern. You then took a smaller copy of it and intersected it with a pattern, and you merged them. And now I've just added colors to these to make it look more dramatic. What I've done here is I've even made a smaller version of the box, again, by just making it a bit smaller. Then I've added a yellow color section. I've added a color shift key to get kind of the orange effect. And then I've added the mixer here just so I can make it lighter or darker. Okay, I don't know why the one I was working you through didn't work, but this is pretty much what you want to do. I want to show you one more thing here though, and that is we've got the opaque and light shading, so this is casting light. I've also changed the reflection of this so that it kind of kicks off some light. And if you look at this, you can see that this looks a little bit flat, but if reflection is a mirror, so if you make the mirror dark and then you click up the alpha on it here with this little panel, what you do is you actually give your model a little bit of reflectivity, which you can see coming up right now. And so that looks pretty cool. What I did then from our design phase is I made it a surface with no planet. So there was, I turned the sky down and the sun down so it was black. And then I came down here and I picked a color terrain. No, I picked a ArtMatic sky, which was a 360-degree sky, ArtMatic 360. And I picked the one that was 3D billion stars, but you could also make it Utopia blur. You could make it double moon and stars, anything that you like. The nice thing about these 360 is as you move your figure, the sky moves around them and so on. But this is a way that you can take an object and you can etch it with a couple of patterns, as we've done here a couple of times, and merge them together. And that creates a very interesting structure. There's sort of an outer structure, and then there's some inner stuff. Gosh, I don't know what it would be, some kind of space thing maybe, or reactor in space or something like that. Wherever your imagination takes you. If you look at some of the ArtMatic promo stuff, Eric has one that's much more elaborate than this, which he calls Borg Cube. Well, this is the principle behind the Borg Cube. We've simply taken a DF object, we've subtracted from it a DF pattern. We've done that a couple times. We've merged the result together, and we've colored it to get this result. Okay, now let's try our third model, if you're still hanging in there. And this is going to be something that is just basically a different approach from the two things that we've just done right now. And what we want to do is we want to make a checkerboard. And instead of making a checkerboard, say, using 64 squares that we all lash together, I'm going to show you a way that you can use some very powerful techniques to make a very complex file out of very simple designs. Okay, this is what we're going to end up with. A checkerboard. It has 64 squares. It's also got 16 checkers on it. And we're going to try and build it. If it fails, we'll look it up from the file. But let's try this and see. So I'm just going to erase this picture and bring back the background. So I'm just going to close it and then make a new one. And I'll see you have the same background here. And I'm going to go over here and just simply get rid of this and create a new basic object. Bang, bang. And let's make this a box. And let's just keep its radius at size 2. We go down here and make sure that we have a geographic color lookup table so we see our picture the way it is represented. We'll clear these keyframes and we will save it as box primitive. ArtMatic. Okay. Now let's go down here into Voyager. We will open up our DF Objects editor. We'll go to Open DF Object here, and we'll select Box Primitive. And then there it is. That is a cube floating in space above a mesa, or in front of a mesa. Doesn't look like much. So the question is, how can we build a checkerboard? How can we build a checkerboard from this? Well, one thing that you could do is you could make another one here and another one here and another one here, and you could make sort of 64 different kind of cubes. But I want to show you a filter that's very, very useful, and it is a 1-1 filter. It's called Modulo. It's right here. And when you click on Modulo, you'll see a menu of possibilities. We want to use repeats n, which lets you select the number of repeats that you want to have in your object. So why don't we choose 8, because there are 8 squares in a checkerboard. And we know that the period here is basically how far apart each object is from the other. We know that the diameter of our cube is 2, so the radius is 2, so the diameter has to be 4, which means that we want to have at least a period of 4 so that the cubes can appear. And you'll notice now that this is connected onto the x-axis. There's also a y and a z. Whatever axis you connect this to is the axis that your cubes, your modulos will appear on. So let's go down here and connect the modulo to inlet 1. So we're changing it on the x-axis. And when we click our refresh, we should see I am obviously cursed today. And you know why? Because I didn't load this into, I made a fundamental mistake. I brought this up and I did not load it into Designer. So I was not actually working on the same file. So my bad. I'll just fix that very quickly. That's something that you always want to look out for. Even users like myself miss that a lot of times, and it's always annoying until you figure out what you've done. But at least this lets you know that we're all human. Okay, modulo. We want repeats n. We want a radius of period of, let's make it 8, and we want some points there. Okay, now if we pull back a little bit, we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cubes. We need 2 more, so 7 and 8. Now I've spaced them apart because I want to put cubes in the middle. If you made this space 4 here, in other words, exactly the radius and diameter, then they'd be next to each other. But we want them to be 8. And I'll tell you what, let's also just add some color to them. So let's make them black. Okay. And let's, we're going to have to combine this with other objects. So we will just pack it in a second. But, it occurs to me that I just made a row of 8 in the X dimension, but I also need tiles in the Z direction. So what would happen if I added another 1 to 1, oops, 1, 1 modulo? Same idea, we'll make it repeating n, and we'll actually just copy it. But let's attach it, instead of the x-axis, let's attach it to the z-axis, or z if you speak British English. Outlet 1, inlet 3, connect. There you go. Now you have a grid of 32 of these, or 64, or whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, it may occur to you that this is a bit large for a checkerboard. And you're right. We actually only want 4 squares of black, and there'll be 4 squares of white. So we'll just take that away. And there you have basically half a checkerboard. Let's add some white tiles to this. We'll do this. We will take our object, and we're going to make a compiled tree, as Peter demonstrated to us. So we will click on the bottom here to highlight the group of tiles. We'll click N to make a compiled tree. Now, let's add another 3-1 object. We'll just copy this one. I did it again. Bad, Paul. Bad. Add an object. Copy it. And let's open this up. If you have the compiled tree and click on E, it opens up. Now we have these tiles and they're black. Well, let's just make these ones white. And let's, of course, add these two together. To do this, we can simply take a 2 in, 4 out output. Remember, we're working with RGB color. So we'll pick and you're thinking, where are they? Well, it turns out that the white tiles are exactly on top of the black tiles. When you merge 2 objects, they always appear directly on top of each other. So you need to use a little space manipulation. To do that, let's just open this up. And up here where we had this placeholder, nice 3-3 placeholder that isn't doing anything, let's assign it a function. Let's make it a 3D offset. This will enable us to shift the position of the things that are in this tree. And let's shift the X by 4. Oh, there you go. Okay. So now we've added the white tiles and we have how many squares? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And how many do we have? 1 blank, 1 blank, 1 blank, 1 blank. So it's clear to me that we're going to need to add some tiles into the middle ranks here to fill it in. And the way that we can do that is we can simply do this entire process again. But rather than making 2 compiled trees and doing it, let's just make this one into a compiled tree. And let's add it in. And we'll Command C to copy, Command V to paste, oh, I'm sorry. When you copy and paste, you have to copy and paste the same number of inputs and outputs. If you see this one has 3 and 1, this one has 3 and 4. Designer will not let you make a mistake like that. So we'll have to use Control, click, and make this 3, 4. Now we can copy and paste, and we have a copy of our checkerboard. We're going to want to merge these 2 together. So again, you don't have the opportunity to work with 8 inputs at once, so we'll pack these. We'll once again add a 2, 4 tile and to blend them, and we'll make it pack logic. And we'll connect like this. Now at this point, we have the same object here, but we have 2 of them, but they're exactly on top of each other. And what we want to do is adjust it so that we can get the tiles together. Now here's the thing, if you think about it, if we just shift it, the black tiles are always going to be on this side and the white tiles are going to be on that side. But what we really want is this row of black tiles to be down here on the right-hand side. You see why? Because that's the way checkerboard looks. So again, let's go back here to our, we're going to open up our new compiled tree that we just made. And we will change this tile to, instead of an offset, oh, I'm sorry, I made another one. Instead of an offset, let's change this to a rotation. This will rotate your object in 3 dimensions. And what we really want to do is just rotate it, flip it over, or in the business, what you call a glide reflection. So we're going to, I'll show you how it works. We'll just change the X by 90 degrees, which will set it on its end. Whoops. Okay. And if we flip it to 180, it pops down, but now you can't see it because it's still aligned on top of these tiles. So what we have to do then is go in here and just change this to a offset, and we'll offset the X by 4, and we'll offset Z by 4. And there you go. So in the same way that Peter built his faces project out of a simple figure that he repeated time and time and time again, we simply made a checkerboard with 1 cube that we have magnified a number of different times. And we've used some very interesting and simple space distortions. We've used modulo to expand a figure. We've used 3D rotate to flip it. We've used 3D offset to shift it around in space and put it into position. I should tell you one thing about using the modulos. You don't really have any control over the individual tiles. So you can't go in and, deal with them individually. They only work as a group. But in this case, where we wanted a bunch of white tiles and a bunch of black tiles, it worked out really nicely. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, what good is a checkerboard without checkers? And so let's make some checkers. Okay, so We'll go back to the parent here, the basic root level, and we'll add a object. This time we're going to add a XYZ shape, but we're going to choose a cylinder. And we're going to make the dimensions of the cylinder sort of checker sized, which will be a diameter of 2. We don't want it too tall, so let's make it about 0.3. We can color it red by adding a 1,4 tile. Let's make it red. We're going to want to merge it with this down here. And again, we're going to have to use the packing function because we can't merge 8 inputs at once. So we'll pack both of our outputs. This technique is called cascading, and you use this a lot in ArtMatic. And that's why you want to try to put things into compiled trees when you can, because you very quickly run out of space when you're making your designs, and it's very frustrating. So by using compiled trees, you can save some space. Now let's just merge these two again with a 2 in, 4 out packed logic. And connect output 1 to inlet 2. Okay, now where is the tile? Well, it's actually, as I remember I said, things are put on top of each other. So your checker is actually in the center of this. So if we add a little offset here. Now, if you look at here, you can tell where you're going. You can look at your DF object, and by shifting the Y input, you can see you're moving it up a little bit there. And sure enough, the checker appears on the checkerboard. And there you go. Now, you can adjust its position. You can make it go a little bit more centered in the square. Do what you ever want to do. I'm going to stop at this point, and this is a challenge to you. I wonder if you can use the techniques that we've just developed here and make your own set of red and black checkers and put them in the proper place on the square. I'll give you a couple of hints. You're going to want to move this red checker into its original or its starting position, which is going to be over here on the checkerboard in the left-hand corner. So you're going to want to have your checker here. Then you're going to want to use modulo functions to create a couple rows of checkers. And here's another tip. You don't have to use the rotate. You can do this all with modulo because of the unique way that a checkerboard is symmetrical. So you can make a set of red checkers, and then you can offset them and make a set of white checkers. So that is a little challenge for you. And again, to show you what it looks like when you're done, I'll just go back and show you my final result. This is what you want to try and do. And I bet you can do it pretty easily if you just follow the techniques that we've done here. I'll actually show you what it looks like. It's all in a compiled tree. And so if you open this up, this is how you do the checkers. So if you get stuck, open it up and take a peek, but there you go. So this is making a very complicated object with over 75 parts with basically 2 simple DF shapes. It's a very cool idea. I think we have a little bit of time, although I see that we're running a little bit long. We're more than an hour, but I'd like to just leave you with one more technique that you can use a lot in your own work. And that one is, I'm going to show you, it's in your files, and it's known as the Crosshatch tutorial. If you open it, it's a figure like this. And what you have here is you have a very cool crosshatching effect. You've got texture on the crosshatch, and then you've got a star field behind it. And to do this, you do some very, very interesting space manipulations. So let's give this one a shot, shall we? So we'll just close it and reopen it. Okay. Now to do this one, what we're going to do is go back and just get rid of this nice thing that we've done. And once again, you're correct. We're going to go back and start with a DF object. But this time we're not going to use the built-in objects. We're going to create an object ourselves, clear these out, get the correct shading in here. We're going to create an object using a technique known as sweeping. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to select a 3 in, 2 out tile. And the one we want is revolution and sweeps. This will create a path that you can sweep an object around. It's a little bit like lathing if you're used to using that in some of the 3D programs you may have used. But you want to sweep something, so we're going to sweep down here a 2-1 object, and they are found here in the profile shapes. These are all different kinds of shapes, and each one of them you can sweep in a pattern to make a different effect. What we want to do here is actually take a rectangle, and we're just going to arbitrarily adjust this because I've already done it. Okay. And let's save this and load it. So we'll save as rectangle. And save it in Designer. Now let's go once again, come over here, open up, find our rectangle, and there it is. Okay. So what we've done is we've swept a rectangle around here in a circle revolution. If you swept it in a rectangle in 4 squares, you get kind of a different shape. You get like a fortress shape, actually. Let's see there, if you look at it. I've made it kind of tall, but you can see that's kind of a fortress shape, which is a nice primitive if you want to start making DF buildings. There are lots of things that you can do, and I encourage you to explore these by sweeping an object around a path. But what we want to do right now is pick one in particular that's very useful. It's called lines radial disk. And when you do that, it creates your rectangles are swept around in a radius. And right now you see we have 5, and there are 5 rectangles. We're just going to tweak the parameters a little bit here to make it more fun. We're going to have a radius of 32. We're going to make the inner radius 0, and when you watch when I click this, it'll bring little bits together here. So there's no inner radius, it's just a complete merger right there. And then we're going to make a bunch of them. So we'll make 32. And there you get, like, this is what it's going to look like. Now, a very nice space manipulation that we're going to do in a second is to warp this in order to make our triangle. But right now, let's save this as a compiled tree because we need it again. So, compiled tree, okay. Now, let's take this compiled tree and let's, above it, add a tile, and this tile is, we're going to use a tile that warps space. It's called a 3D mirror and rotate, and it's right here. If you look at this, there are lots of different menu options that you can do, and as you pick one, you can see what it does to your object. This one is kind of cool, but what we want to do is helix in Y. And when you chose this and you make this about 5, and this about 0.5, you get a nice looking turbine effect there, okay? So now we've taken an object, we've swept it in space, and we've warped it so that it looks like this. You remember Peter discussed the fact that in an ArtMatic tree, there's a space distortion area where you select your space, and then there's an object area where you create your object, and then there's a texture area where you create your texture. Well, that's exactly what we have right here. So we have we've warped our space, and then we've created an object. Okay, let's do this now, just to show you how it works. Let's make a sphere by adding a branch. And let's make it pretty big, so we'll make it, say, 22. And let's bring it down here. Now we're going to want to add another compiled tree. We wanted to take our copy of this tree and copy it and again, warp it. So what we will do is we will make a branch off of the helix. We'll make a copy of this one. Now we have two copies of this, but the thing that we want to do is to merge them together with a logic tool. This time we can use a 2-1 logic tool because we don't have color in it yet. So we'll just make a simple logic tool and connect it like this. Okay, now, again, because we've made exactly the same copy, these are on top of each other. But what I want to show you is if you go back to this second copy and you make a space above it and you further distort its space by adding a tile known as 3D Distorts and Bends. And what we want to do here is we want to rotate XZ plane by Y. Now you see we've taken our copy and we have rotated it in space and we've created the basic structure for our little crosshatch. All we need to do now is basically take the sphere and we want these two to get together. And what we want to do is, I think, subtract this crosshatch pattern from the sphere. So let's add another 2-1 logic. Like this, we want, we want 2-1 logic. We want to add outlet 1 into inlet 2. And we want to choose, no. How about intersect? No. How about, okay, we need to make this sphere a bit bigger. Needs to be big enough to see. So let's make it 22. Not 2,222, but 22. Not 50, but 22. Okay, now you see, we can see that our sphere is there, and now if we come back and we intersect it, we get a sphere. The intersection means that the two parts of the two figures that overlap are saved and the rest is thrown away. We've saved the crosshatch and we've saved the sphere, and that's at the same time made these nice little cutouts. I think it would be nicer if it were hollow, so remember we know how to do that. We'll take a mirror and we'll set it to about 0.3. And now we get a nice empty sphere. But you want more, you want texture. So let's take the sphere and add some texture to it. Here it is. It's going into this right now, but we're going to have to simply remove this for a moment and add some texture to it. In order to do that, we would go up and we would take a texture. We'd add the texture to the sphere, and it would be applied to that. Because I see that we're running a little long on time, I'm just simply going to cut to the chase and show you how this works out. Okay, let's load that. And here you see the same thing that we've just done. Here is a tree, and in it you have, these are the crosshatches. And then what we do with that is we add a texture, a 2-4 texture. We bring the texture down and we intersect it with the crosshatch. In other words, we bring the crosshatch output, it's a DF stream, and we take it, it looks like, and we take that merger, which is the sphere and the crosshatch subtracted from each other, intersected, and we add that to the 4th channel of a alpha scale and offset, just like we did at the beginning with the cube. Here's the texture. Here it is merging in, and that's how you create the clouds on the picture. Then to create the inside, you simply have to go back and create a hollow sphere and put it on the inside of this object. So this entire line right here is now the crosshatched with the clouds portion, the blue. We simply create a sphere. We make it a little bit smaller. We add a 3:2 spherical projection, because remember, you can't project texture onto a sphere and make it look nice unless you do that. We've chosen the 2:4 texture of Starfield. It comes down and it is merged with the sphere. And the result is, when you add them together, you get this nice black background inside the sphere. And that looks a lot like what we want to do. It was inspired by an old album by The Who, Tommy. That was the kind of the cover. And but what we've done is we've used very simple space manipulation tools to take something, spin it in space, flip it over, and then subtract one from the other. And this is the result that you get. So I'm sorry that this is running a bit long. You must feel like you've been hit with a fire hose, and I do apologize for that. ArtMatic always feels like you're being hit with a fire hose. But what I hope you can do is go back and work through these examples that I've given you and see how it comes together for you. If you have any questions, what would you say, Caleb? Can we can post questions, or how do you want to handle that part of it?
Yeah. The YouTube channel allows you to post comments, and I'll get a notification of that comment if you have questions on the specific video. I highly encourage everybody to join the Worlds of ArtMatic user group on Facebook. There are folks that have cumulative century of knowledge of ArtMatic and the depth that ArtMatic provides. So that's the place to go where you want the deep questions answered.
Okay, that's it exactly. How did I even get to the point where I am? Well, I've done it by working with this for quite a long time. At first, I was very frustrated by how hard it was, but I began making simple objects and also following things that interested me in the world of graphic arts. I'm very interested in the interplay between figure and background, between space and hollow space, and that's pretty much been the theme of this whole seminar. But whatever your interests, you need to go and start looking at simple examples, and Eric has provided hundreds of them in the application files that come with the products. Take one, look at it, see if you can begin to understand it. The Explore room is a very good place where you can take an object and change the parameters without destroying it and see what happens. You can just make a copy of a file and play with it to your heart's content. If you break it, you can reload the master copy. But you have to start tinkering with things, I think, to really get a feel for them. And I hope that the examples I've given you today will enable you to do that and spark your curiosity a little bit as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Greatly appreciate it.
Well, Paul, actually, but
I've been working with Peter every week.
I know.
So
I know. Why get pedantic?
Paul.
No problem.